This video tutorial will cover how to configure a position for use with the SubItUp time clock. It will include how to set the values for how early or late somebody can clock in or out of their scheduled shift, as well as setting your manager notification preferences and configuring whether somebody can clock in for unscheduled time. In order to access this page, you'll go over to the left-hand side and click on Time Clock, and then click on Time Clock Data, which is the second one down. And then over on the right, click on Configure Time Clock, which will pop up with this box. If your position has not been configured yet for use with the time clock, you will see a red notification here that says your time clock has not been configured for this position, which means that nobody in this position right now is able to use the SubItUp time clock. After you fill out these values here, this will go away and people will be able to clock in for this specific position. In the top right corner, you'll see a drop-down box, and this will list all the positions that you are a manager of. So if you're setting up your time clock for the first time, you're going to have to go in and update all of these positions with different values. On the left-hand side, you will see the option to allow unscheduled clock-ins. It says unscheduled time management here. The way the SubItUp time clock works is it actually goes hand in hand with your scheduled data that you have on your calendar that your employees can see. If you have this checked, you will allow employees to clock in for times that are not on the schedule and times that they are not currently clocked in for. This is usually not recommended, but it could be recommended if you, for instance, have employees that work floating schedules where you're not sure exactly when they're going to work every day, but you want to keep track of their time. The other option here is to allow time clock notes. And if you have this checked, your employees, when they clock in or clock out, are going to be able to have the option to add in any notes that you'll be able to see as a manager. So for instance, they might say, I was 5 minutes late, but I cleared it with the manager, something like that. You would want to allow employees to leave those notes when they clock in if you want that option. The next 4 boxes down below are critically important because they're going to directly relate to when your staff can clock in or clock out. In these values here, you're setting the maximum amount of time an employee can clock in early, clock in late, or clock out late. Now, if these values cannot be blank, so there has to be a number listed in these 4 boxes. And it's always recommended to not have it be a 0, because if you have 0, they basically can only clock in exactly at the right time and clock out exactly at the right time if you have 0 on these 4 different boxes. So it's generally recommended that you can have employees clock in up to 10 minutes early. Maybe I want to have them be able to clock out up to 15 minutes. They can clock out 15 minutes early. And this is, maybe they can clock in 20 minutes late and they can clock out 30 minutes late. Generally, if for late clock out, if you typically have people that are going to be staying later for your shifts and they could stay an extra hour, 2, whatever it may be, you might want this to be a bigger number. And again, this relates directly to the scheduled shifts that are within the SubItUp calendar. For these boxes that are down below for each one, it says allow employees to clock in before the standard time window. If you have unscheduled time management on, we always recommend to have this unchecked. And it's always good to have this unchecked regardless, because if you have this box checked here, it will allow employees to clock in for their next scheduled shift whenever it may be. So if their next scheduled shift is Wednesday, it will allow them to clock in for a shift on Monday, which is generally not something you want to allow. So if this is a concern, but you want people to be able to clock in pretty significantly early on the day of, it'd be better just to have a bigger number here. Maybe it's an hour, maybe it's 2 hours, 60 or 120 minutes. And that would allow you to allow the employees to clock in early, but not days in advance before their next shift. Same thing with early clock out, and late clock in. If you have this checked, it's going to disregard these values, and it's going to allow people to clock in either earlier or later than these values that you have listed. For instance, for early clock out, if you have this checked, what it's going to do is it's going to let employees clock out earlier than 15 minutes, even though you have 15 minutes listed here. If you want to be notified anytime this happens, you will be selecting a checkbox there, and then you can have this on, and you'll be notified at any time that somebody clocks out any earlier than 15 minutes before their scheduled shift time is supposed to end. You can also put in a display message for anytime someone wants to clock out earlier than 15 minutes. If you want a message to say something, you can absolutely have that written there. The next setting is the manager override configuration. So manager override is if somebody is clocking out outside of these bounds or clocking in outside of these bounds that you set. If you have this on, a password or a PIN number is going to need to be inputted in order to allow the employee to be able to do that and clock in or out outside of these bounds that you have set. The password can be numbers, it can be letters, it can be any combination of the two. So if I want it to be fitness, I can have it be fitness. And this is usually something that only a manager on duty will have access to. So if somebody needs to clock in either way earlier than they're supposed to or way out or clock out way later than they're supposed to, a manager can come and type this in and allow that employee to clock out outside of the bounds. You would never use this in conjunction with the allow employees to clock in or outside of the standard time windows, because if these are checked, it's going to allow those employees to clock in or out outside of those bounds. Whereas these are all unchecked, this would be a great time to use manager override, and you can strictly manage your schedule to be sure people are not clocking in or out outside of these values. If you are in a position where you're more flexible and you don't mind somebody clocking in or out outside of these values that you set, then it might be better to have this off and you can have the allow employees to clock in or out button checked. The last on the list here is the manager communication list. And this is going to be who should be notified if either the manager override is used or if somebody is clocking in or out outside of these windows and you have notify me checked. So this is basically all communication for the specific position will be in relation to what is listed here on the manager communication list, and you can have multiple people utilize this list if you need to. After you're done and you have configured everything you need for this position, you'll hit update and you'll say your configuration has been saved, and that red notification text will go away and you'll be able to use this position to clock in. If you are setting up your time clock for the first time, don't forget to go back to the drop-down box here and go to your next position to configure that, and those can be different values for each position depending on what you need. If you need further assistance, please feel free to reach out to us via email, support@subitup.com, or via phone at 617-401-8733. Our office hours are Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Thanks so much.